I used to think I was a calm person. But when he, a man who constantly preached about team spirit, swallowed my $150,000 bonus whole to pad his own pockets, I understood. Silence can kill. I didn't fight back. I built a trap. 3 months later, that same man would face $3.4 million in federal fines. His career destroyed. His reputation in ashes. And the beautiful part, he never knew it was me. My name is Emily Hart. At 34, I'd already climbed higher up the corporate ladder than most people manage in a lifetime. Deputy CFO at Valcoris Systems, a data security firm headquartered in Salt Springs, Oregon. Not bad for someone who started as a junior analyst with nothing but a state school MBA and an unhealthy obsession with spreadsheets. I'd earned every rung of that ladder. 6 years of 16-hour days. Weekends spent modeling scenarios instead of dating. Vacations canceled to close deals. When COVID hit and half our clients jumped ship, I was the one who found creative financing solutions that kept us afloat. I restructured our debt, negotiated payment deferrals, and somehow convinced investors we were still worth betting on. The board called me their miracle worker. My boss, the old CFO Marcus, said I'd saved 300 jobs. That's why, when we closed the Meridian acquisition in September, a $47 million deal that would triple our market share, Marcus promised me a $150,000 bonus. "You've more than earned it, Emily," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Hell, you practically engineered this whole thing." 2 weeks later, Marcus was gone. Early retirement, the email said. But I knew better. I'd seen the closed-door meetings, the hushed phone calls, the way certain board members avoided his eyes. Enter Richard Kane. 52 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of handshake that tries too hard to prove something. Former investment banking CFO. He swept in with promises of financial discipline and strategic restructuring. The board ate it up. Within days, he'd replaced half of Marcus's team with his own people. Sharp-suited vultures who spoke in acronyms and looked at spreadsheets like they were religious texts. I survived the purge. Of course I did. I knew where all the bodies were buried, financially speaking. Richard needed me, at least until he could figure out how I'd kept this company breathing through the pandemic. The bonus conversation happened on a Thursday. I remember because I'd worn my lucky Navy suit, the one I'd worn to every major negotiation. Richard's corner office still smelled like Marcus's cologne, even though they'd already replaced the furniture with glass and chrome monstrosities. "About the Meridian bonus," I began, settling into one of his uncomfortable modern chairs. He didn't look up from his monitor. "What bonus?" "The performance bonus Marcus approved. For the acquisition. $150,000. Now he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. Not surprise, not confusion, amusement. "I'm afraid there's no budget for that," he said, leaning back in his chair. "And frankly, Emily, while your contributions have been adequate, you weren't exactly the deciding factor in that acquisition." Adequate. The word hung in the air like a slap. "I structured the entire financial framework," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I spent 3 months. The decision's been made." He turned back to his screen. "If you're unhappy with your current compensation, we can certainly discuss your future with the company." A threat wrapped in corporate speak. I recognized the technique. I'd seen him use it on 2 senior managers just last week. Both had cleaned out their desks within days. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I understand. Good. Oh, and Emily?" He smiled then, and it was the smile of a man who knew he'd won. "I appreciate your team spirit. It's what makes Valcoris great." Team spirit. The same phrase he'd used in his all-hands meeting while announcing necessary restructuring that somehow resulted in his own compensation package doubling. I walked back to my office on autopilot, sat at my desk, stared at the financial models I'd built, the projections I'd sweated over, the deals I'd saved. On my monitor, an email blinked. The latest expense report for executive approval. Richard's name was all over it. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, client dinners at restaurants where the wine cost more than most people's rent. That's when I decided. He wanted to play games with numbers. Fine. I'd been playing that game longer than he'd been pretending to care about team spirit. I didn't know yet how I'd do it. But sitting there, watching him bill another $400 lunch to the company while denying me money I'd earned with my blood and sweat, I made a promise to myself. Richard Kane had just made the most expensive enemy of his life. He just didn't know it yet. The first crack in Richard's facade appeared 3 weeks later. I'd been staying late, ostensibly catching up on quarterly reports. In reality, I was studying. Not the reports, those I could do in my sleep, but the patterns hidden beneath them. Every expense, every contract, every mysteriously approved budget increase. Richard thought he was clever. But numbers don't lie. They whisper their secrets to those who know how to listen. It started with the consulting contracts. Fragmented, each just under the $50,000 threshold that would require board approval. Same services, different company names. Phoenix Advisory, Meridian Consulting Group, Silver Lake Financial Partners. Shell companies, all of them, registered to the same address in Delaware. I cross-referenced the payment schedules with Richard's calendar. Every client dinner in New York coincided with a consulting payment. Every strategic planning session in Miami matched a wire transfer. He was filtering money out of Valcoris and into his own pockets, using these shells as a funnel. The amount was staggering. In just 2 months, he'd moved nearly $400,000. But I needed more than suspicious patterns. I needed proof. That's when I noticed the access changes. My permissions to the executive financial dashboard, revoked. The merger acquisition files, suddenly password protected. Even the vendor payment system now required Richard's personal approval for me to view. Security protocols, his assistant Amy told me when I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I wasn't the only one being frozen out. The head of internal audit, Sandra, found herself suddenly excluded from executive meetings. The senior controller who'd questioned a suspicious expense report was transferred to our Portland satellite office. One by one. Anyone who might spot the irregularities was being neutralized. But Richard had made a mistake. In his rush to lock down the current systems, he'd forgotten about the backup servers, the ones we'd set up during COVID for remote access. My credentials still worked there, a ghost in the machine he'd overlooked, late at night. I'd download files to an encrypted drive, contracts, emails, wire transfer confirmations, building my case piece by piece, like constructing a financial bomb. The pressure was getting to me. I'd catch myself checking my rearview mirror on the drive home, double-checking my apartment locks. When an unknown number called my cell, my heart would race until I realized it was just another spam call about extended warranties. Then came the email that changed everything. It was buried in a thread about vendor optimization, corporate speak for switching to cheaper suppliers. But attached was something that made my blood run cold. A draft press release announcing my departure to pursue other opportunities. Dated 3 weeks in the future. They were planning to fire me, clean house before I could become a problem. I printed everything that night, every document, every email, every suspicious transaction. My apartment looked like a FBI evidence room. Papers covering every surface, connected with string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But it wasn't paranoia if they were actually out to get you. That's when I remembered Naomi Delaney. We'd met at a financial compliance conference 5 years ago. She'd been with the SEC then, a senior investigator with a reputation for taking down corporate fraudsters. Now she was in private practice, but she still had connections. More importantly, she understood how these games were played. I called her from a burner phone I'd bought with cash. "Emily Hart," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Been a while. Still fighting the good fight at Valcoris?" "Actually," I said, staring at the evidence spread across my living room floor. "I need your help burning it down." There was a pause. Then, "Tell me everything." So I did. Every detail, every transaction, every shell company. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up, painting my apartment in shades of gold and shadow. Jesus, Emily, Naomi breathed. This is big. SEC big, FBI big. How much evidence do you have? Everything. Financial records, emails, recorded conversations. Wait, recorded conversations? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Oregon's a one-party consent state. Every meeting where he discussed these contracts, every phone call where he threatened employees, every casual admission of fraud, I have them all. You beautiful, paranoid genius. Naomi was typing now. I could hear the keys clicking. Okay, here's what we're going to do. The SEC has a whistleblower program. You file a complaint, provide the evidence, and if it leads to a successful enforcement action, you get a percentage of the penalties collected. How much are we talking? With what you're describing, millions in fines. Your cut could be 10 to 30%. I thought about my $150,000 bonus, about Richard's smug smile, about all the employees who'd been bullied, transferred, or fired for asking questions. I don't care about the money, I said. I want him destroyed. Oh, honey. Naomi laughed, but it wasn't a nice sound. ¿Por qué no los dos? We're going to destroy him and get you paid. Now, let's talk about keeping you safe while we build this case. The plan was surgical in its precision. Naomi laid it out like a military operation. First rule, she said, meeting me at a coffee shop 30 miles outside Salt Springs. From now on, you're not Emily the vigilante, you're Emily the model employee. Show up, do your job, document everything, but don't make waves. She slid a phone across the table. Encrypted, use this for anything related to our case. Your regular phone, your work computer, assume they're compromised. They're monitoring me? Richard's paying an IT consultant $8,000 a month through one of those shell companies. What do you think they're doing? Updating Adobe. The paranoia I'd been feeling suddenly felt justified. Over the next 2 weeks, I became an actress worthy of an Oscar. I arrived early, left on time, submitted reports without questioning the numbers I knew were fabricated. When Richard passed me in the halls, I smiled. When he cut my department's budget by 30%, I thanked him for the opportunity to optimize our resources. Meanwhile, at night, I was building a case that would end him. Naomi introduced me to her contact at the SEC through an encrypted video call. No names, no faces, just a voice that asked precise, surgical questions about every transaction. I walked them through the shell company network, the fraudulent contracts, the systematic looting of Valcoris's coffers. The Delaware companies are textbook, the voice said. But we need the final piece, proof that Richard personally benefits from these arrangements. That's when I remembered something. Richard's executive assistant, Amy, had submitted an expense report for a team-building retreat in the Bahamas. But I'd seen the attendee list. It was just Richard and 3 consultants from the shell companies. I still had access to the corporate credit card portal through the backup server. It took me 10 minutes to find what I needed. The hotel bill, charged to the company card, listed Mr. and Mrs. Richard Kane as guests. The consultants? They'd never checked in. But the bank records showed wire transfers to a Bahamian account the same week. An account that, through some careful digging, I traced back to a trust with Richard as the sole beneficiary. Got him, I whispered to my empty apartment. That's when things started to go sideways. Monday morning, I arrived to find my keycard deactivated. Security had to manually let me in, apologizing for the system glitch. But I saw the look they exchanged. Tuesday, it announced they were upgrading my computer. The new one came with monitoring software that tracked every keystroke. Wednesday, Richard called me into his office. Emily, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I've been hearing concerning things. Late nights in the office, unusual system access. Care to explain? I'd rehearsed this. I've been working on the year-end projections. You know how I am about accuracy. He leaned back, studying me like a snake studying a mouse. And this has nothing to do with your Disappointment about the bonus situation? Of course not. I understand business decisions have to be made. Good. Because I'd hate to think you were the type to hold grudges. That's not very. He smiled. Team-spirited. That night, my apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen. But things were moved, shifted. A message. I called Naomi from the encrypted phone. They know something. Then we accelerate. How much more do you need? I have enough to bury him, but… No buts. File the complaint tomorrow. Get out of there. I can't just leave. They'll know it was me. Emily, listen to me. Your $150,000 bonus isn't worth your life. She was right. But I'd come too far to run now. I submitted my notice the next day, citing my mother's health. She needs full-time care. I told HR, tears in my eyes. I have to move back to Ohio immediately. Richard's smile when he heard was like a shark's. Family first, he said. We'll miss your… contributions. I had 2 weeks to finish what I'd started. 2 weeks to gather the last pieces of evidence while pretending to train my replacement. 2 weeks of feeling Richard's eyes on me every time I walked down the hall. The anonymous call came on my last Thursday. Unknown number, digitized voice. Stop what you're doing. This is your only warning. I hung up and immediately called Naomi. How fast can we file? SEC complaint goes in tomorrow. You have everything backed up? 3 copies, different locations, cloud storage under fake names. Good girl. Now, about that mother in Ohio. Already arranged. My cousin lives in Columbus. I'll stay with her until this blows over. My last day at Valcoris, I cleaned out my desk under Amy's watchful eye. Family photos, coffee mug, 6 years of memories packed into a cardboard box. Richard didn't bother to say goodbye. As I walked out of the building for the last time, I felt the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. Every crime, every theft, every lie. All condensed into 32 gigabytes of evidence. Your move, I whispered to the glass towers behind me. The SEC complaint was filed that night. Case number 2023-7834, JD. And Emily Hart, the loyal deputy CFO who'd saved Valcoris from bankruptcy, officially ceased to exist. Columbus, Ohio, was supposed to be temporary. A place to lay low while the SEC did their work. My cousin Sarah asked no questions when I showed up with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, just handed me keys to the guest room and a cup of coffee. Stay as long as you need, she said. Mom always said you were the smart one in the family. If only she knew how spectacularly stupid I felt, sitting in her spare bedroom, refreshing news sites obsessively for any sign that the investigation had begun. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Nothing. Naomi called on the encrypted phone. These things take time. The SEC doesn't move fast, but when they do, they move hard. What if he's destroying evidence? Let him try. You gave them authenticated copies of everything. Besides, destroying evidence is its own federal crime, just adds to the pile. But waiting was killing me. I'd dream about numbers, wake up calculating forensic accounting patterns. Sarah started leaving wine on my nightstand. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in November, everything changed. The call came from Naomi at 6 a.m. Check the Wall Street Journal, now. My hands shook as I pulled up the site. There it was, below the fold, but unmistakable. SEC launches investigation into Valcoris systems. Questions surround executive financial practices. I read it 3 times, heart-pounding. The article was careful, full of alleged and reportedly, but the details were damning. Shell companies, fraudulent contracts, millions in questionable transfers. They didn't name Richard. But anyone who knew Valcoris would know exactly who controlled those financial decisions. My personal phone, the one I'd kept turned off since leaving Oregon, suddenly had 43 missed calls when I powered it on. Former colleagues, reporters, numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off again. The encrypted phone rang. Not Naomi this time, my SEC contact. Ms. Hart. We're moving into the forensic phase. We'll need you available for depositions starting next week. Can you come to D.C.? Yes. Good. And Ms. Hart? You should know. Mr. Kane has retained criminal defense counsel. Very expensive criminal defense counsel. I smiled for the first time in weeks. How expensive? The kind that charges $2,000 an hour and only takes cases they think they can win. Let me guess, he's paying with company funds? That would be inappropriate for me to confirm. I could hear the smile in his voice. See you Monday. The deposition was held in a nondescript federal building, all beige walls and fluorescent lights. I spent 12 hours walking investigators through every document, every transaction, every recorded conversation. They were thorough, these government accountants. They understood the game as well as I did. The Bahamas trip, one asked, pushing a document across the table. You have proof the consulting meeting never happened. I slid over hotel security footage I'd managed to save before my access was cut. Time-stamped, Richard by the pool while he was supposedly in strategic planning sessions. And this wire transfer to Nassau? Cross-reference it with the trust documents. Page 47 shows Richard as sole beneficiary. They nodded, scribbling notes, building their case brick by brick. Meanwhile, back at Valcoris, the walls were closing in. A former colleague, Deidre, texted me from her personal phone. It's chaos here. FBI showed up with boxes. Richard locked in his office screaming at lawyers. The investigation was meticulous. They froze accounts, seized computers, interviewed everyone who'd ever questioned a suspicious expense. The shell companies crumbled under scrutiny, paper constructs that led back to a single offshore account under Richard's control. But Richard wasn't going down without a fight. His lawyers issued statements about misunderstandings and standard business practices. He hired a PR firm to spin the narrative. A few board members even defended him publicly, right until the FBI showed them the evidence. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Emily. It was Naomi, and she was laughing. Honey, you better sit down. What happened? Richard just got hit with 17 federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy to defraud investors, the works. And the civil penalties alone are $3.4 million, criminal fines on top of that. And here's the beautiful part. Because he used company funds for his legal defense after being warned not to. They're adding breach of fiduciary duty. He's personally liable for all of it. I sank into Sarah's couch, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not satisfaction, that would come later. This was relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. There's more, Naomi continued. The whistleblower award percentage has been determined. Given the significance of your evidence and the successful recovery, you're getting 22%. I did the math instantly. Old habits. That's over $700,000. After taxes, about $600,000. Not a bad return on a denied $150,000 bonus. But the money felt abstract, unreal. What felt real was knowing Richard Kane would never destroy another career, never steal another bonus, never smirk his way through another threat. What happens to him now? Trial's set for spring. With the evidence you provided, his lawyers are already floating plea deals. He's finished. Emily. Completely finished. I hung up and walked to Sarah's kitchen window, watching the rain fall on suburban Ohio. Somewhere in Oregon, Richard Kane was discovering what it felt like to be powerless, to have everything taken away by someone he'd dismissed as adequate. My encrypted phone buzzed, a text from my SEC contact. Thought you should know, Valcoris board just announced a full restructuring. They're bringing Marcus back as interim CEO. Seems they need someone who actually understands financial ethics. I deleted the message and started thinking about Vermont. I'd always wanted to live in Vermont. The spring trial never happened. Richard Kane, the man who'd swaggered through Valcoris like he owned the world, folded like a cheap suit when faced with 17 federal counts and a 97% conviction rate. His lawyers negotiated a plea deal, guilty on all charges. 42 months in federal prison, and full restitution. I watched the news coverage from my rental in Burlington, Vermont, snow still clinging to the mountains outside my window. Richard in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, that shark smile finally wiped clean. The reporters called it one of the largest corporate fraud cases in Oregon history. They never mentioned the whistleblower. I'd insisted on complete anonymity, and the SEC kept their word. As far as the world knew, their investigation had uncovered the fraud through routine oversight. The $600,000 hit my account in 3 installments. Clean. Legal money with a paper trail that would make an auditor weep with joy. After years of scrimping to build my career, I suddenly had more money than I knew what to do with. But first, I had to disappear properly. Emily Hart needed to fade away. Not dramatically, that would draw attention, just a quiet dissolution, like morning mist burning off a lake. I legally changed my name back to my mother's maiden name, Emily Martelli. Bought a modest house in Stowe with cash. Nothing flashy. Just a 2-bedroom craftsman with good bones and better views. Set up an LLC for consulting work, focusing on financial compliance for small businesses. The kind of clients who'd never crossed paths with anyone from Valcories. The transition took months. New driver's license, new bank accounts, new everything. I even changed my hair, trading the corporate blonde highlights for my natural brown. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone Richard Kane had never met. One evening in July, I was reviewing a client's books when my secure email chimed. Naomi, checking in as she did every few weeks. Thought you'd want to know, she wrote. Valcoris stock is up 40% since the restructuring. Marcus implemented all your COVID-era recommendations. The company's thriving. I stared at the message, waiting to feel something. Vindication? Regret? But there was only quiet satisfaction. The company I'd helped save was in good hands. The cancer had been cut out. Another email arrived, forwarded from my old work account through several filters I'd set up. The sender was Deidre, my former colleague. I know this might not reach you, but I wanted to say thank you. After everything came out about Richard, 5 of us who'd been denied promotions or bonuses got settlements from the company. My daughter can go to college now without loans. I don't know if you had anything to do with the investigation. But the timing? Well, thank you. I closed the email without responding. Emily Hart was gone. She couldn't write back. But there were others. Sandra from Internal Audit, reinstated with back pay and a promotion. The controller who'd been exiled to Portland, brought back as CFO. Even Amy, Richard's assistant, had testified against him in exchange for immunity and kept her job. The best message came in August, forwarded through so many encryption layers it took me 10 minutes to decode it. Marcus, my old boss, writing to an email address that no longer existed. Emily, if this somehow finds you, the board authorized me to pay out all performance bonuses that were wrongfully denied during Richard's tenure. Your $150,000 bonus has been sitting in escrow, waiting for you to claim it. Please come home. I laughed until I cried. Then I deleted the message and went back to my client's books. That night, I treated myself to dinner at Stowe's best restaurant. Ordered the wine Richard would have expensed to the company. Raised a glass to the empty chair across from me. To adequate contributions, I said quietly. The waiter probably thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. My new life settled into rhythm. Consulting work in the mornings, hiking in the afternoons, evenings spent reading by the fireplace. I dated a local veterinarian for a few months. Told him I used to work in finance back west. Kept the details vague. When it ended amicably, I realized I was okay being alone. I'd spent so many years fighting for recognition, for my place at the table. Now I had a different kind of power. The power of being invisible. One October morning, I was having coffee at my favorite cafe when CNN played on the television. Richard Kane, reporting to federal prison. Orange jumpsuit, shackled hands. No trace of the executive who'd terrorized a company. Corporate greed at its worst, the commentator said. A cautionary tale about the importance of financial oversight. The barista shook her head. Can you believe people like that, stealing from their own company? Terrible, I agreed, adding extra sugar to my latte. She moved on to the next customer, and I went back to my newspaper. The financial section had a small article about Valcoris's record quarterly earnings. They'd promoted from within, the article said, built a culture of trust and transparency. I folded the paper and left it on the table. Outside, the Vermont autumn was showing off, mountains painted in gold and scarlet. I had a client meeting in an hour, a small nonprofit that needed help with their accounting systems. Real work. Honest work. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, probably spam. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me look. Heard you moved to Vermont. Beautiful country. Thank you for everything. M. Marcus. Somehow, he'd found me. Or found enough to reach out. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Who is this? Wrong number. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, my mistake. Enjoy the leaves. I deleted the thread and blocked the number. Emily Hart was gone. Emily Martelli had work to do. But as I walked to my car, I caught myself smiling. Somewhere in a federal prison, Richard Kane was learning what it felt like to have his life controlled by someone else. Somewhere in Oregon, a company was thriving without fear. And here in Vermont, a woman who'd refused to be silenced was building something new. Not bad for adequate contributions. Not bad at all. 3 years passed like seasons in Vermont, quietly, inevitably, each leaving its mark. My consulting firm, Martelli Financial Advisory, had grown beyond what I'd imagined. Word of mouth in small business communities is powerful when you consistently save people money and keep them compliant. I specialized in helping women-owned businesses navigate the labyrinth of corporate finance. It felt like penance, or maybe justice, using everything Richard had tried to destroy to build something better. The house in Stowe had become home in ways my Portland apartment never was. I'd learned to ski, badly, joined a book club where nobody talked about P&L statements, adopted a rescue dog named Baxter who had no opinion about my past. I'd almost forgotten about Valcoris entirely when the email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. It came through my business account from a name I didn't recognize, Jennifer Reeves. Ms. Martelli, I'm a financial journalist with the Wall Street Journal. I'm writing a book about the Valcoris fraud case and the role of whistleblowers in corporate accountability. I have reason to believe you might have unique insights into this case. Would you be willing to speak with me, on or off the record? I protect my sources. I stared at the screen, coffee growing cold in my hands. 3 years of carefully built anonymity, threatened by one email. I didn't respond. She wrote again a week later. I've spoken with several former Valcoris employees. Your former name, keeps coming up. They speak of you with tremendous respect. Your story deserves to be told. Delete. The third email included an attachment. Ms. Martelli, I understand your reluctance. Please read the attached chapter about Richard Kane's victims, the employees whose careers he destroyed, the retirements he stole, the lives he upended. Your voice could help prevent this from happening again. Against my better judgment, I opened it. 20 pages about the human cost of corporate fraud, Sandra from internal audit forced to delay retirement after her bonuses were cut, a junior analyst laid off while Richard collected millions, whose family lost their home. Story after story of people I'd worked with, people I'd tried to protect by bringing Richard down. At the bottom, a handwritten note scanned in. These people got justice because someone was brave enough to speak up. That someone deserves recognition, even if anonymously. I closed my laptop and took Baxter for a long walk in the woods. The snow was melting, revealing last year's leaves, brown and decomposing into new soil. Nature's recycling program, death becoming life. That night, I called Naomi from my old encrypted phone. A journalist knows, I said without preamble. Jennifer Reeves. Yeah, she called me too. She's good, Emily. Thorough. Fair. She's not looking to out you. She wants to tell the story of how the system actually worked for once. The system didn't work. I had to burn my entire life down to get justice. Did you? Or did you get to build a better one? I looked around my living room, the fire crackling in the fieldstone fireplace, Baxter snoring on his bed, the business awards from grateful clients on the mantel. What do you think I should do? I think Richard's in prison, Valcoris is thriving, and you're sitting on a story that could help other people in your situation, but it's your call. 2 weeks later, I met Jennifer Reeves at a coffee shop in Montpellier. She was younger than I'd expected, with keen eyes and a recorder she kept conspicuously turned off. I'm not confirming anything, I said. Of course not. We're just two women having coffee, talking about corporate finance reform. She was good, drew me out with careful questions, never pushing too hard. By the end, I told her things I hadn't even told Naomi. The fear, the doubt. The nights I'd wondered if $150,000 was worth becoming someone I didn't recognize. For what it's worth, she said as we prepared to leave, I don't think you became someone different. I think you became someone who refuses to be silenced. That's rare. If I agree to help with your book, I said slowly, I need complete anonymity. Change details. Make it impossible to trace back. Done. I'll send you the draft chapters for approval. We shook hands. As she walked away, she turned back. One more thing. Richard's lawyers have been reaching out to journalists, trying to spin his story for when he's released next year, claiming he was a scapegoat, that the real fraud was committed by a vindictive employee who framed him. My blood went cold. What? Don't worry, nobody's buying it. But it might be good to have the real story out there. The truth has a way of protecting itself when it's documented. That night, I made my decision. I would help with the book, anonymously, not for recognition, but for all the employees still trapped under their own Richard Keynes, wondering if speaking up was worth the risk. I opened a new document and began typing. Chapter 1. The Cost of Silence. I used to think I was a calm person. The words flowed like water breaking through a dam. 3 years of silence, finally given voice. Outside my window, the last of the winter's snow melted away, revealing the green shoots beneath. Spring in Vermont comes slowly, then all at once. Kind of like justice. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize, forwarded through several anonymous servers. Heard someone's writing a book about corporate whistleblowers. Good. Some stories deserve to be told. Thank you for everything you didn't do. A friend from Oregon. I smiled and deleted the message, then I went back to writing. The truth was finally coming home. The book came out in September, 4 years after Richard Keynes stole my bonus. Whistleblower, Inside America's Corporate Fraud Machine, by Jennifer Reeves. My story was Chapter 7. The Accountant Who Counted. Jennifer had kept her word. Details changed, names altered, timeline shifted. But the heart of it was there, how one denied bonus had toppled a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list within 2 weeks. I watched Richard's release from federal prison on a live stream, sitting in my Vermont office with Baxter at my feet. He'd served 31 months of his 42-month sentence. Good behavior, apparently. His hair had gone completely white, his swagger replaced by a shuffle. No media waited for him, no executive car, just a taxi and a cardboard box of belongings. The financial press had moved on to newer scandals. Richard Keynes was yesterday's news. But I hadn't moved on. Not entirely. My consulting firm had evolved into something larger. We now specialized in whistleblower protection consulting, helping companies build systems that actually encouraged employees to report fraud. My clients included 3 Fortune 500 companies who'd read Jennifer's book and decided they never wanted to be Chapter 8. One October morning, I was preparing for a video conference when my assistant knocked. Emily, there's someone here to see you. No appointment, but he says it's important. I looked up from my papers. Who? Marcus Delacroix says you used to work together? My blood froze. Marcus, Here, in Vermont. Send him in, I heard myself say. He looked older but healthier. The stress lines that had marked his final days at Valcoris replaced by laugh lines. He stood in my doorway, taking in my office, the awards, the client testimonials, the view of the mountains. Emily, he said simply. Or should I say Ms. Martelli. How did you find me? He smiled. I didn't. I found your company. Took a chance that the founder of Vermont's premier financial ethics consulting firm might be someone I knew. Your website photo is pretty different from the Emily Hart I remember. But the eyes? The eyes don't change. We stared at each other across 4 years of secrets. I'm not here to cause problems, he continued. I'm here to say thank you. And to offer you something. He pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check for $150,000. Your bonus. With interest. I pushed it back across the desk. I can't take that. It's from my personal funds, not Valcoris. I've done very well since returning as CEO. Stock options, you know. The least I can do is pay a debt that should never have existed. Marcus, you saved the company. You saved 300 jobs. You saved my legacy. Take the money. Emily. Please. I looked at the check. Such a small amount now, compared to what I'd built. But it had never been about the money. On one condition, I said. You donate it to the Valcoris Employee Relief Fund, the one you set up for people Richard hurt. His smile widened. Deal. But I'm adding another $150,000 of my own, in honor of an adequate employee who turned out to be extraordinary. We shook hands. As he turned to leave, he paused. The board would welcome you back, you know. Any position you want. Name your price. Thanks, but I have a company to run. Besides, I gestured out the window at the Vermont mountains. The view here is better. Yes, he said softly. I suppose it is. After he left, I sat for a long time, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Valcoris CFO Richard Kane files for bankruptcy, unable to pay restitution. I deleted it without reading. Richard Kane was no longer my concern. That evening, I had dinner with Jennifer Reeves, who was in town for a book signing. So, she said over wine, any regrets? I thought about it. The years of looking over my shoulder, the relationships I'd kept at arm's length, the name I'd left behind. No, I said finally. No regrets. Good. Because I have news. The book has been optioned for a limited series. HBO. They want to know if you'd consider being a consultant. Anonymous consultant. Of course, though they're offering serious money. I laughed. It always came back to money, didn't it? But money was just numbers on a screen. What mattered was what you did with it. Tell them yes. But my fee goes to funding legal support for corporate whistleblowers. Jennifer raised her glass. To adequate contributions. To burning it all down, I countered. And building something better from the ashes. We clinked glasses as the last light faded from the mountains. That night, I stood on my porch, Baxter by my side, breathing in the crisp Vermont air. Somewhere out there, Richard Kane was learning what it meant to have nothing. Somewhere else, Valcoris employees were working without fear, their retirement secure, their bonuses protected. And here I was, Emily Martelli, consultant, advocate, survivor. Not all villains get their comeuppance, but sometimes, if you're patient enough, smart enough, and willing to burn your old life to the ground, justice finds a way. Even if it costs everything, even if it takes years, even if you have to become someone new to make it happen. I'd lost a $150,000 bonus. I'd gained a $3.4 million revenge. But more than that, I'd gained something Richard Kane could never understand. The knowledge that when power tries to silence you, the most dangerous thing you can do is refuse to stay quiet. The cold Vermont wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of snow. I smiled and went inside, closing the door on the past. Emily Hart was gone. But her story? That would live forever. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of how one woman turned a denied bonus into a multi-million-dollar downfall, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Emily's position? Your stories and perspectives make this community special.